Hi, I'm Beau from TaylorHedley Property, and today we're here with Matt Chamberlain from Chamberlainbrown. Matt has an extensive experience in the local marketplace buying property throughout Lake Macquarie and Newcastle. And we're going to run through a few questions today, Matt, just about some of the benefits of, one, using a buyer's agent, but also some of the key tips that you've got out there for buyers looking in the local marketplace. So would you be able to kick off today with some of the tips that you've seen that will help a buyer, whether it be their first, second or third purchase, that's out there looking in a marketplace that is still quite competitive?
Of course. I think, starting right at the top, and it comes as maybe a little bit of common sense, but doing as much research as you can prior to being thrust into that decision-making process, whether it's making an offer or bidding at auction. And that, for us and our client, always starts with getting very clear on, number one, the budget, but number two, what are the goals of this purchase? So if I'm moving from my first home to my second, it may be upsizing. I'm looking for 4 bedrooms instead of 3. And in those 4 bedrooms, I might be looking for specifics about the size of the third and the fourth bedroom so my children can grow with us and as our family grows. So know very quickly or clearly, shall I say, what you're looking for. And then number 3 is when you're going to open homes and speaking with real estate agents, earmark the price guide and the style of property that you're walking through and watch those campaigns through to when that property sells, which is going to help you build up your own understanding of the local market so that when you are thrust into that decision-making period or position, you have some recent experience to make some informed decisions from.
I think that's a great tip, especially because I see a lot of buyers out there in the marketplace that'll go and get their pre-approval first, and that's great to be in a position to act when you're ready. But at the same time, I'd love as a buyer to see people getting out there more, looking at more properties before they're actually ready. So when they are in a position where they're pre-approved, they've got a conveyancer, if they've aligned themselves with a buyer's agent, they have a good understanding of what they're after, but they also have a good understanding of what properties are selling for in the area, because photos can be deceiving. Like actually getting out there and physically inspecting the property, seeing the condition of the home, and also being in a position where they get the feel of the size of the property is going to give them greater market context when they are ready to buy.
Absolutely.
Matt, there's a number of real estate methods that are used when transacting property in Newcastle and Lake Macquarie, namely being expressions of interest, private treaty, and also auction. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience as a buyer's agent out there navigating those different methods of sale?
Yeah, of course. It can be a topic of confusion for buyers who haven't been through the process multiple times. So we can start with expressions of interest. And this is, I would say in my experience, more so common where the property itself is relatively unique. So we find that there's less information to justify an accurate price guide from the real estate agent. So the agent is actually looking for market feedback, that's buyer conversations at open homes and the things like that, to help understand what buyers, which are collectively the market, would value the property at. So expressions of interest can be really ambiguous, which is sometimes the biggest challenge with it, right? And a key for any purchaser going through the expressions of interest process would be to, like I said earlier, deep dive into your research, understand a lot of recent comparable sales, and get a lot of different perspectives so that you can make up your own mind with a lot of information. So that's number 1. Number 2 would be the private treaty method. And this is, I'd say, the vast majority of sales that most purchasers would experience, where you're just negotiating directly with the real estate agent and often in competition with other purchasers, but you're doing that throughout a relatively undefined time frame, which again has its challenges in that if you're prepared to move very quickly, you may be moving faster than, say, another purchaser, which in itself may be an advantage in that particular negotiation. Some tips there would be, again, know some recent sales in the area to help you understand what the property is worth. And number 2, communicate effectively and clearly with the real estate agent. If they don't know that you're interested in the property, they don't know that they should contact you if another purchaser has shown serious interest and is making an offer that the vendor would accept. So that's private treaty, and then the last one being auction. Now, we've all watched a few auctions on the block, I'm sure, but in Newcastle, there's a few varied ways of how the auction process can unfold, and namely the most common one I would say is at the property or in an auction room, where everyone that's looking to buy the property, the auctioneer, the real estate agent, is all in the same room at a particular time frame. And we have a range of advice and strategies for our clients that are looking to bid in that environment. But then the second method, and somewhat less common, is where you have an online auction. And there's a little bit of different structure around that process, but it's often, I'd say, provided by a really common auction platform called Realtair. So I'm sure that often, or that name can come up for buyers when they're looking to bid at auction. Very common, very trustworthy, so don't be concerned.
Yeah, the auction can be a daunting process. So tell us a little bit more in your experience about buying property at auction, because I think what you've touched on private treaty and expressions of interest, which are methods of sale that do happen in our local marketplace. But I would say probably the most feared process by both buyers and sellers is the auction process. So tell us a little bit about bidding strategies, the way you prepare your clients for auction, and some of the best auctions that you've been involved in.
Well, the best ones are the ones that we win, but in terms of preparation, we have a lot of structure again for our clients, and naturally it does start with understanding true fair market value in the property itself. Number two, to a lesser extent, might be worth understanding how many other interested parties are likely to register, which again will help you make a judgment call on the biggest piece of information, which is where should I set my bidding limit? For us and our clients, we make that very clear. We have some instructions in writing prior to the auction starting, and we've had some clear discussions being if the property price or the bids go higher than that price, we know at our, the deepest part of our heart that we're willing to walk away from that property. So think very, very clearly about what that price is likely to be for you. But then on top of that, and to come back to your question around some strategy itself, no one has ever purchased a property without making a bid at auction. So we always say to our clients, and we often follow through with this, we like to be the opening bid, and we like to bid confidently and strongly until we reach our limit. Now, a lot of people, kind of miss the fact that on an auction room floor, buyers aren't necessarily negotiating directly with the owner anymore. They have an auctioneer that's facilitating the auction process, but their competition is actually the people that they're negotiating with. So we always recommend our clients keep a keen eye on the other parties that are bidding at the auction. See if you can read into any body language and maybe make some decisions on the fly.
I think one of the key points you've touched on there, and I guess one of the dangerous things I see a lot of buyers do, is they don't do the preparation to know what their budget is and where they're willing to go. Because the biggest fear for someone is to go to an auction and overpay. But as you touched on, if they go through the process and make sure that they have a clear understanding of where they're willing to walk away from that property, they're not going to be in a position where they're getting buyer's remorse after the auction itself because they feel like they've paid too much.
Absolutely. And even to add to that, a lot of confidence boosting for a buyer that is successful at auction is you've got to remember that most times there's a bidder that was willing to pay only a slight amount less than you to be successful. So that in itself is market evidence that you've paid a fair price.
Yeah, I was going to say that gives you market context to say that you've only paid a little bit more than someone else. And in my opinion, that's fair market value.
Absolutely.
So Matt, one of the key things when I'm dealing with a buyer's agent is I have great confidence in their ability to be able to, number one, put forward the best conditions and also put themselves in a position to exchange contracts quickly. Could you tell us a little bit more about some of the key things that you do to make your offer more desirable to the vendor?
You touched on it in your question, in that confidence in any negotiation, whether it's for fine art or for property, is confidence can only be determined by how much information the other party is sharing, right? And as a purchaser or as a seller, you only ever know realistically half the story. So what we do as purchasers to put ourselves in the best position possible is ensure that we have, number one, understood as much as possible about the owner's situation, the real estate's planned timeline of negotiating and things like that. And then second, doing as much of the pre-purchase checking or as many of the pre-purchase checks as possible before we get to the negotiation, so that we can deliver confidence to the real estate agent that when our offer is accepted, we will move forward to exchange as quickly as possible. Now, a couple of things that we do for our clients, it's a bit of a no-brainer, but of course we're reviewing and acting on a building and pest report, doing any investigations that we need to fully understand the issues, if there are any, on a property. Number two is we are very across the local area, whether the property's in a flood zone and we're going to potentially come up against higher insurance premiums, for instance. We've done multiple checks. We've ensured the client has seen the property from start through to finish multiple times so that they don't have any question marks hanging around their willingness to proceed. And then lastly, as you touched on in your question, ensuring that our terms are best aligned to the owner's preferences and perspective. Now that means that, of course, purchase or price is very important, but if we can understand a certain set of situations, or shall I say, if we can understand the situation that the owner is in and we can help them with their transition away from this property and into the next, if that's the case, through the terms that we offer, then naturally that's going to also add an additional layer of confidence, which can, in certain circumstances, help us actually position ourselves in a much better light than other buyers.
Yeah, I think because you're not always the buyer that's got the biggest budget or the best budget, but if you can utilize the terms and conditions to suit the vendor and use that as leverage to get you in a stronger position, I've seen properties go the way of a buyer who's actually at the slightly lower figure, but they have better terms and conditions that come with their offer. So that's a really good point. Matt, with auction being quite a prevalent sales process used in our local marketplace at the moment, can you tell me a little bit more about what strategies you utilize for your clients to make sure they're in the best position to secure a property at auction?
Of course. I think naturally the most important thing is working out what your upper bidding limit is going to be. And then from there, we build a strategy of how we make our bids from that. So to determine our upper bidding limit with our clients, again, come back to the data, use your best estimate on what you believe the property is worth based on the different perspectives and information you have at your fingertips. But once you have that number, this property could be a property that has emotional value to you. We see it very often with our clients in that a property may be estimated to be around $1 million. However, it has the large fourth bedroom, it has the pool in the backyard, and mum and dad can see themselves living in this in this house and raising the family for years to come. Now, what we call that in a sense is the emotional value you place on that particular property being right for you. Now, we can have a rational perspective, but it's always good to think about what kind of emotional premium, if any, you would put on this particular home based on what it means for you. So what we would do in that instance is we would help the client work out within their budget where they'd like to set their limit. Once we have that limit in place, that's very structured and set in stone. Because when we get to the auction room floor, body language for us as buyer's agents, as people who have experienced auctions multiple times before, body language is a really big signal to the other buyers who are bidding. So for us, we want to show as little body language as possible. We want to avoid talking to each other or taking a lot of time between the bids that we make. And we want to be observing the other buyers potentially making these mistakes. Because naturally, if you hadn't set a limit before you got to the auction, you're going to have a discussion with your partner, probably on the auction room floor. Should we go maybe an extra $1,000 or $2,000? That for us as buyers agents is a signal that the other bidder may be getting close to their limit, which then changes the strategy and how we bid.
Definitely, it's a sign of weakness, isn't it? At the end of the day, you want to show a sign of strength and that you're there to buy the property. And it's an emotional game that you're playing off with the other parties, but you want to look like the strongest bidder there on the day.
That's right. It's not uncommon for observers after an auction to come up to us and say, we thought you would buy that property at any cost. You had the deepest pockets, of everyone there. The reality is that's not the case. We sometimes are very, very close to our limit. However, the way we portray ourselves will give that illusion, which may potentially influence the outcome.
And Matt, if someone's out there and they're in the marketplace and they've missed out on a number of properties and they're in a position where they're starting to get frustrated with the whole buying process, what are some of the benefits you feel a buyer's agent is or can give to a potential purchaser?
There's a really big range of things that we can offer. Number one, I'd say, is probably peace of mind, knowing that no opportunity is missed. We have great relationships with real estate agents right across our target areas, which helps us often find properties before they hit the market and some properties that will never come to market, which opens up, firstly, the number of options that the client has. But then once we've identified a property, it's our job to ascertain whether it's suitable for the client, their needs and their goals, and complete an extensive due diligence process and price estimate so that however we go forward with the purchase, whether that's a private treaty, whether we are bidding at auction, or whether potentially we're purchasing that property in isolation off market, the client is in the best position possible to secure that property.
And one of the things I'll say on that is that you touched on a really key point there, is that buyers agents are out there on databases with not just our agency, but a number of agencies. And the hardest part when you're purchasing a property off market is, number one, for a seller knowing whether that's a really good price or not, because they don't have a whole lot of market context, but also for a purchaser, their fear is, are they overpaying for that? And I think that's where a buyer's agent can come in and say, look, I've recently missed out on a number of properties in this street or this immediate area, and give a buyer confidence that they're actually buying the property in isolation in this scenario, which means that they have to have full confidence that they're not overpaying for that property. And I think that's where a buyer's agent can really assist.
Absolutely. Information is key, especially in these off-market scenarios where there is no underbidder, there is no other buyer that's willing to pay $5,000 less than you. So using that information, that data to support our decisions is critical.
Yeah, excellent. And just tell us a little bit about where our clients can potentially reach out to yourself and your team.
So you can find us at www.chamberlainbrown.com.au, or I'm sure you can find our details on Instagram or wherever you typically find yourself on technology these days.
Excellent, Matt. Really appreciate your time today.
Thanks.